Dimmadel was reeling at everything going on around her. Growing up in a very magical place, she had seen plenty of strange species and creations. But Demon's Head University was much stranger. Fortunately, the huge mass of people were in near constant movement, which she felt was helping her keep from staring. Luckily for her, Vera was all business. Neither Dimmadel nor Siobhan had time to even do a full 360 of taking in the sights before Vera had hooked both of their arms and led them onwards. Apparently she knew the right way to go, which was something that made Dimmadel curious to know the how of. Then she saw, not without some hilarity, that Vera had a classic tracking spell made of hair and wax. It was not a very useful spell unless the target wants to be able to be found by the seeker. It was typically used by young witch couples to keep track of each other. Dimmadel thought it seemed rather juvenile, both given the task at hand and what she had judged Vera's strength at. But nonetheless Vera marched them down a grand staircase wide enough for 10 people to spread their arms out and stand hand to hand. She led them through the middle, walking sassily and causing the student body to part for their travel. The staircase twisted in large turns to create a spiral effect as they traveled downwards deeper into the school. Just when she thought she couldn't take any more steps, they ended at an enormous cavern-like room filled with buildings and bustling commerce. Vera stopped for a moment, looking a bit confused for a moment as she held the tracker, then nodded and started off again. "This way, ladies, we're almost there." Dimmadel and Siobhan had to speed up to keep pace with Vera, who was now speed-walking briskly. Together they weaved through crowd after crowd of patrons milling about their local establishments towards a huge round building Dimmadel soon recognized as a coliseum. As Vera neared the entrance, suddenly a great commotion erupted and the doors opened to allow what must have been half of the arena's occupants. Laying atop this mob of people was a young man perhaps a year or two older than Dimmadel. He had blonde curly hair in ringlets just down to his jaw, and seemed to be in incredible shape other than his leg, which was freely dripping blood in long streaks. Dimmadel looked at Vera to see what she thought of this, and could immediately tell that Vera was put out. She was looking out wistfully at the boy atop the crowd, then she clicked her tongue in a sort of irritation and looked at the other two girls. "Well, this won't be as long of a visit as I had hoped. But we have what we came for. Go scoop up that bloody dirt," she said, pointing to the red trail the crowd had left behind. Then she turned away and leaned against the outer wall of the Colosseum. Dimmadel and Siobhan went to work doing as she asked with little issue or torque. Both could tell that Vera was in no mood for conversation. Soon they had collected a jar each of bloody dirt and Vera turned heel and began looking around on the ground. After a moment she seemed to find a spot she liked because she nodded appreciatively and tugged a ring off of her right middle finger. "You both ready to get our girls?" she asked Dimmadel and Siobhan, who nodded and pumped an excited fist in the air respectively. Vera nodded and tossed the ring high into the air and said a word in Sylvan. Then as the ring came down it expanded into a large dark circle wide enough to drop into. Together they jumped into the portal and emerged standing upright back in the ritual room. Dimmadel looked at Vera cautiously, but she had her back turned towards the door. Vera emitted another drastic sigh then motioned for Dimmadel and Siobhan to follow her as she left the room to rejoin the coven. Inside the main club room, the rest of the witches were working dutifully over the same table to decipher the sigils. Dimmadel, Vera, and Siobhan approached and looked over them to see how far along they had gotten, Vera clucking her tongue impatiently. Dimmadel saw, however, that they had it almost finished. She could read all the demonic symbols now thanks to her brooch, and so she could read what they had pieced together. Let XX fall from this XXXXX to XXXXXXX another. Let our XXXXXX remain, and our minds XXXXXX. XXXXXXXX here whilst we are yonder. Dimmadel smiled and stepped back, then tapped Vera on the shoulder. Vera turned with a querulous eyebrow raised to her, and Dimmadel said, "They're almost finished. But I don't think they know it." Then she shared what she could read that it said so far. Vera sprang into action and pointed out what they had done. Then very shortly after there was a completed spell. It read, "Let us fall from this realm to inhabit another. Let our bodies remain and our minds wander. Protected here whilst we are yonder." The coven of young women had a few moments of sheer celebration, jumping around and making wolf calls. Then Vera was suddenly all business again and said, "Well, I think it's about time we go and rescue our girls. What do you all say?" In a boomingly overjoyous voice. The rest of the coven cheered enthusiastically, and they all funneled to the ritual room. 10 witches in total all gathered and held hands to create a closed-loop circle around the center of the room and recited the words of the spell, repeating each line 3 times before moving on to the next. Then, once the incantation was finished, from Spectre's perspective it seemed as though all 10 young women collapsed simultaneously. But the ladies of the coven, they had felt an awful and irritating scraping feeling across their entire bodies and minds as they saw the world stretch and thin into long white strips. That made it look as though reality itself was tearing apart. Then just when it seemed to pull so far it might snap, it slowly reconnected, and what they saw was a sprawling grey landscape with blood-red skies. Immediately every girl in the circle began to heave dryly, as it suddenly felt as though their stomachs had only just now made the trip and had rocketed into their bodies, sloshing all the way. Just as they began recovering, they heard a weak voice go of Vera. And together they looked and saw one of the lost members, Delphi. She was trapped under what was unmistakably a statue that had fallen onto her lower back. The girls rushed forward and pulled the statue off of her and began healing her, but to no avail. Their magic wasn't just not working, anything they tried seemed to fail in abstract ways. What would have been healing spells erupted into fake flowers, springvine snakes, and various other joke tricks. It was as though something was turning their magic into cheap jokes. Finally Vera growled both loudly and angrily and half shouted, "What in the 6 hells is going on here?" When suddenly a new voice spoke out. "The store is open. If you want power, he can sell it to you. Yup, yup, yup. He sells it all." Everyone turned to look, and Delphi groaned out, "Oh no, not again. She's back." Vera snapped back, "WHO is back?" But it wasn't Delphi who answered. It was Hammer. "Karmar, what are you doing up there? And what are you talking about?" Everyone looked then and saw indeed it was the spitting image of Hammer, but with hair so wild and frizzy it resembled more of a lion's mane. She was barely clothed, as it looked like she had ripped her own clothing apart into tatters, revealing ugly and infected-looking claw marks that seemed self-inflicted. And her eyes were the worst of all. Unlike her sister Hammer, who had a light brown eye color, Karmar now had milky white orbs with no pupil or iris. "I bought my freedom, sister. I bought vitality and life. I will never fear death again, dear sister, and neither should you. Join me. Buy from the crooked man." Karmar screeched out to them all. Vera looked around fervently, then shouted out, "Where is Quindolin?" Karmar began laughing raucously, and Delphi spoke out in a pained grunt. "She's dead. That thing killed her." Then Karmar gave it to him.